Hello everyone and welcome back to Void Dwarf Studios, where we have the final episode of the Lumineth series, talking about the twin deities of light that started it all, Teclis and Tyrion. The elven brothers who awoke in the realm of Hysh as gods, and began their journey to rediscover the elven race, and after a failed attempt when it came to the poor Deepkin, finally managed to create and restore some of the past glories of the High Elves in the form of their Lumineth children. But enough about their children. We are talking about Teclis and Tyrion in this video, and I say Teclis and Tyrion, but really in Age of Sigmar, Tyrion has taken quite a bit of a back seat. Now, I'm not even remotely suggesting that that's because Tyrion isn't important, because he is. He is instrumental in creating the military traditions within the Lumineth and the pursuit of martial perfection. But Tyrion is very much a background character right now. Tyrion is hampered, you might say, by a new affliction he has. Tyrion is blind and can only see the world through Teclis' eyes. This makes things awkward, as you can imagine, and this is why the two gods, when they reawoke within the realm of Hysh, after the destruction of the Warhammer Fantasy world, which for the sake of simplicity I'm not going to get into in this video, and I will talk about Teclis and Tyrion in the old world when I start doing my Warhammer Fantasy series. They wandered Hysh looking for any remnants of their elven race, discovering the landscape of Hysh and all its interesting geographical points of note, as well as the fascinating creatures and monsters that wandered around. But when you're the literal god of magic and god of light, these two were pretty safe on their travels, let's just say. And eventually they do bump into Sigmar, who actually happens to have a few elven souls that he managed to rescue from the world that was. It's not really entirely explained how Sigmar has elven souls in his possession, but that is what is written down, so I'm not really sure there, folks. Sorry. But disheartened as they were by the lack of living elves that were around, Tyrion and Teclis resolved themselves to help Sigmar build his new pantheon and to restore semblances of order. Teclis was instrumental in teaching magic to the various human cultures, and it was only upon discovering Morathi and the bloated form of Slaanesh that they managed to come up with a plan which resolved, as I like to constantly say, punching Slaanesh in the stomach until he vomits up elven souls, which eventually led to the creation of the Lumineth. And much like most projects that Teclis decides to get involved in, we all know how badly that turned out. Demonettes running rampant, and Teclis had to basically rewrite all of his thinking after meeting up with the spirit of the moon, Selenar. This is how Teclis began to realise that the elves had been going about, well, everything wrong. Pretty much since day one. The elves were so hell-bent on this idea of perfection that they constantly forgot to remain humble. And the Teclian ladder and all the Elementar training that the elves are now encouraged to do is all about giving them some kind of grounding, giving them a sense that they must remain humble. For unlike their ancestors, these elven magics do not come from themselves or from their ability to weave the web of magic around them. It is power that is granted from the Elementars. It is power that can only be asked for, it cannot be taken. And that was the principle behind an awful lot of Teclis' thinking upon meeting Selenar and discussing the problem with the elven race. The hope that Teclis had was that this would help the elves to not become arrogant and would actually prevent them from going down the same path that they originally did back in the old world. That is not to say Teclis believes all magic is bad. He is the god of magic, after all. And this is why the Lumineth do have wizards, sorcerers, mages, however you want to describe them, within their ranks. But the key thing here is that these sorcerers are now not the majority. They are the minority. It is something that is undertaken more seriously and with an understanding of how to remain grounded being the most important aspect. as opposed to power and perfection for its own sake. The ether quartz stuff is not something Teclis is overly fond of, although he sees the benefits of expunging the more powerful emotions, as these are essentially what gives Slaanesh power, but it's also a risk, a massive risk. Not dealing with your own emotional traumas and using, well, effectively drugs to circumvent this is a risky road to go down at the best of times. Tyrion is definitely not the individual who would give anyone advice when it came to anger management. See End Times and the whole Avatar of Cain nonsense that he went into. But enough of that. We are talking about Teclis and Tyrion as they are right now. So, what has Teclis been up to? Well, first of all, during the whole Soul War stuff, he got really annoyed that Slaanesh was now freed, and on top of that, Nagash decided it would be funny to invade his realm and start poking his toys. Teclis took umbrage with this, and promptly popped over and gave Nagash a serious slapping, one that is leaving him a bit sore right now, and the God of Magic has kind of made his point well and truly known, and the great necromancer now has to lick his wounds for the moment. Now, by no means was this an easy venture. This was a god fighting another god. Both of them were exhausted after the ordeal, but in the end it was Teclis who was able to secure that win, at the cost of many, many Lumineth lives. And even Alariel had to ask Teclis if this was truly worth it, as now with greater enemies on the horizon such as Kragnos and the Demons of Chaos starting to push back, perhaps Teclis' energies would have been better spent elsewhere. We'll have to wait and see on that one. And where was Tyrion in all this? Haven't got a clue. Tyrion is kind of absent from an awful lot of the story. He is in the background. He is there training and perfecting the elven war machine, but he does not play a forward role. Ironically, he now takes more of a back seat as opposed to in the old world when Tyrion was really the one who tended to be in the foreground, while Teclis was the planner and schemer in the background. I'm unsure if this is because GW don't really know what to do with Tyrion right now, or they just want to mix things up a bit and put Teclis in the foreground, as Teclis really is the planner and schemer, and that does kind of suit the whole god thing better. Tyrion was kind of the elf who liked to get stuck in and sort things out himself, never being particularly fond of politics when he was a mortal. Well, as mortal as elves get, anyway. And I think that is why Teclis is now more in the forefront, and why we actually have a model for him. And what a model it is as well. It is in fact two individuals who are ridiculously powerful as individuals. The Archmage Teclis and Selenar, the Spirit of Hish. The Lunar Sphinx adding considerable strength and power to Teclis' magical might. And yeah, the profile kind of sums it up really nicely. 16 wounds, 10 bravery, a 4+ save, which is, kind of okay, and a 12-inch move when not wounded. Selenar allows Teclis to fly, even though Teclis knew more than enough spells that can allow him to do the same thing. And on top of that, Selenar also gives the following buffs, one of which being called the Aura of Selenar, as the Lunar Sphinx allows those that it bonds with to have a greater arcane knowledge and understanding on an instinctive level. This is represented by adding 1 to casting and dispelling and unbinding rolls for all friendly Lumineth realm lords, so long as they are within the aura range. Now, if the Sphinx takes damage, then the aura range decreases, but when it's only suffered 4 wounds or less, this is a 16-inch bubble, and the model doesn't have to be wholly within that range, as specified in the rules. So, yeah, that's quite a big bubble that you can have where all of your mages have ridiculous buffs to all aspects of spellcasting. And Selenar also is definitely not weaponless. The Moonbright Talons mean that you have 6 attacks when unwounded that are hitting and wounding on 3s, -2 rend and a flat 2 damage. Now obviously when it takes wounds there are fewer and fewer attacks, but that's still a very respectable slap in the face. And the last thing Selenar brings is the Seeing Stone of Selenar, a priceless gift that Selenar allowed Teclis to have that allows him to see the flow of magic, quite literally seeing it, as it is in its natural form. And this means he finds it even easier to bend the whims of magic to whatever he wants to do. And it's represented on tabletop by the following. Each time a friendly unit within range of the model's Aura of Selenar ability is affected by an endless spell or a spell cast by an enemy wizard, you roll a dice. And on a 4+, you flat out ignore the effect of the spell or endless spell. Then you pick an enemy unit within 18 inches, and that enemy unit takes D3 mortal wounds. And the range of the aura is exactly the same as it would be for the normal Aura of Selenar effect, the one that gives you the pluses to casting, dispelling, and unbinding. So not only do you have massive buffs to magic, you also slap anyone stupid enough to use magic within 16 inches of this thing. That's hilarious, honestly. It basically means Teclis kinda solo wins the magic phase all by his lonesome. And then we start talking about Teclis, because this is mostly Selenar at this point. The Seeing Stone is a gift from Selenar, so technically it's a thing that it can use already, but Teclis certainly brings plenty of punch to this particular fight. The Discs of Elementari, which are the 4 mastered elementary disciplines that he carries as a kind of magical belt, means he can absorb hostile magic and redirect it back. In your hero phase, in addition to casting 1, 2 or up to 4 spells, yes, Teclis can cast up to 4 spells, this model can automatically dispel one endless spell without needing to roll any dice. And in the enemy hero phase, this model can automatically unbind one enemy spell without rolling any dice. Yeah, basically Teclis just says no to magic. To anyone who has any chance of magic anywhere near him, he not only slaps you, but he tickles you by just saying no to your attempts to cast, and no to your attempts to, well, do anything magical, really. And finally, for abilities we have the Archmage, as Teclis has frankly been a wizard for a ridiculously long time. And there is no mortal in the mortal realms who could come close to the depth of his knowledge when it comes to the arcane arts. And as such, at the start of your hero phase, you must say if the model will cast 1, 2, 3, or 4 spells. If the model casts 1 spell, it is automatically cast and cannot be stopped. Yeah. So when you choose to cast the 1 spell, it automatically goes off regardless. If you choose to cast 2 spells, each is automatically cast on a casting roll of 12. You don't have to roll the dice, it's just a flat 12, and your enemy has got to match it. And if you cast 4, then the spells act a teeny bit more normally, except for the fact that you don't bother rolling, you just cast them on a 10. And the enemy wizard has to try and beat that, which is slightly more possible, but only just. Yeah, Teclis is kind of absolutely OP ridiculous in the magic phase, but I wouldn't expect anything less from the prodigious powers that are Teclis, especially coupled together with the strength and knowledge of Selenar. Oh, and Teclis is not exactly a weakling in close combat either. Teclis still has his sword, which he likes to use every now and again. 2 attacks that hit on 4s, wounding on 2s, -3 rend, D3 damage. And armed with the Lunar Staff, which is a fascinating little thing, by the way, because the Lunar Staff was, at least, a representation of the elven goddess of the mists, who died in the end times. So, not entirely sure why he still has that, if I'm honest, but hey-ho. The staff, as a ranged weapon, can do the following. 18 inches, single attack that hits and wounds on 2s, -3 rend and D6 damage. That is one hell of a beautiful magical missile that you have there, Teclis. Never leave home without that fancy stick, like all good mages. And, I mean, do I really have to explain this? Teclis is a magical equivalent of a wrecking ball. he will make your enemy really regret bringing any magical assistance to the battle at all, because Teclis basically makes them pointless, especially when you're within 16 inches of them, because Selenar can just say no to magic, and Teclis can just hover around near Selenar, whacking away at spells that are cast on a minimum of a 10, and yeah, just having no real way to stop him. Like, the 4+ save is the only thing you have going for you to maybe try and kill him off. So, whilst I wouldn't necessarily stick Teclis in too many combats, because he could get dragged down in a fight, but yeah, those Moonbright Claws, doing 2 damage apiece and having potentially 6 of them when unwounded, yeah, Teclis is going to be fine for quite a while, especially as Lumineth can have fairly easy access to all kinds of magic. Just make sure Teclis has plenty of buddies around to drag him and Selenar out of trouble if they get too deep. Make sure you've got plenty of lovely spear units, you've got your stone guard, you've got your mountain cows, or your hurricanes, whatever you need. Just make sure Teclis doesn't get surrounded, bogged down, and, well, dragged down by, say, 40 grots. Because that's still a thing that could potentially kill him. I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and this will now conclude the Lumineth series, at least until new stuff comes out. Thank you all very much for listening, and I hope to hear from you all soon. Like and subscribe, and until next time, take care everyone.